Waves of water surged above Xiaoyan and seemed like a mysterious totem that emitted a shocking aura of the grand Tao of water. It drew the attention of everyone within the campsite, and it seemed like a divine miracle was being born. But in next to no time, their exclaims of admiration had transformed into deep shock, because right at this moment gorgeous patterns had gushed out into appearance at almost the exact same time above the other young children. It was the pattern of surging flames, flickering golden light, overflowing green light. All of it was extremely gorgeous and revealed extraordinary scenes. The ninth hell was covered in a gray and hazy sky all year round and was completely barren. It was entirely covered by gray-colored stones and gravel, and its color was monotonous and dry. Yet now, the entire surroundings of the campsite suddenly surged with a multicolored and gorgeous color. Moreover, there was a type of indescribable vitality, and it seemed as if this expanse of the heavens and the earth had become rich and colorful. It was the auras formed from the grand Taos of water, fire, metal, and wood, the purest quintessence energies of the heavens and the earth. At this moment, they descended on this wasteland that had been abandoned by the heaven Tao, and the phenomena created by it was so grand that it caused these ninth hell clansmen who'd lived here for generation after generation to stare with eyes wide open and be dumbstruck. The strong visual impact was like a tempestuous storm that struck their hearts, and they felt an unprecedented feeling of shock. What cultivation technique is that? It's too magnificent, Blackie muttered. I have a feeling that if I'm able to grasp that strength, then I'll be entirely capable of killing a black Cerberus by myself. Scarface touched the scar on his face while his eyes narrowed before glowing with an extremely bright sheen. It isn't a cultivation technique, and it's probably an extremely miraculous and formidable energy. Baldy licked his lips while carrying a burning gaze. That is probably Tao insight. I once heard the Lord Priest speak of it. A long time ago, before our world was abandoned by the three dimensions, practically everyone in our clan was capable of grasping and comprehending Tao insight, allowing us to command the wind and clouds, and be all-powerful with unbelievable strength. Rock, who possessed composure and maturity that far exceeded his age, spoke with a light voice. Tao insight? The other youths revealed confused expression when they heard this. Since they were born, all of them had always been in the ninth hell that was abandoned by the heaven Tao. So how could they have imagined that such a miraculous force existed in the world? Inadvertently, a wisp of restlessness surged out from the depths of their hearts, and they slightly yearned to go comprehend that energy called Tao insight as well. But, out of considerations for their face, not a single one of them was willing to yield. After all, they were firm and unyielding hot-blooded men of the ninth hell tribe. Since they'd decided they wanted to go against Xianxia, then how could they surrender just like this? The youths puckered their lips and remained silent while they stubbornly persisted on their dignity and unyieldingness. These little fellows have become restless. Emoya spoke with a light voice while a wisp of a complicated expression flashed past her eyes. She felt that if the situation continued on like this, then even if these little fellows didn't falter in their actions, their heart would probably have been conquered by Xianxia. It isn't just them. Even I'm slightly moved. Meng Wei laughed bitterly and sighed. That's Tao insight. Besides the wise men from our ninth hell clan during the primeval times, who has comprehended it in such a long period of time. He faintly had a feeling that perhaps this little bit of ability Xianxia revealed at this moment was nothing to Xianxia, but to their ninth hell tribe. It wasn't inferior to opening the door to a new world before their eyes, and it caused them to feel unprecedented shock and longing. Even Meng Wei himself couldn't help but feel admiration and even arouse a trace of anticipation. He wanted to see what enormous changes would occur in the ninth hell tribe under this outsider's leadership. If Emoya spoke abruptly. Her snow-white teeth bit her red and moist lips lightly while she carried an indeterminate expression, and she gritted her teeth and said after a short while, I'm saying if this fellow is able to allow all our clansmen to comprehend Tao insight, then I'll submit to him, acknowledge him as chieftain, and absolutely not disobey him. Meng Wei laughed bitterly as he shook his head and said, even if it was during the primeval times, grasping Tao insights required comprehension ability and natural talent. Isn't your condition too harsh? Harsh? Humph. I don't think so. Imoya grunted lightly from her nostrils. Her figure was hot, slender, and graceful, and her jet-black ponytail swung in an elegant arc under the light breeze, causing her to seem beautiful and charming. Imoya was stunned and was about to speak when the sound of Xianxia teaching suddenly entered his eyes, causing his expression to instantly turn serious as he started to listen attentively. Xiaoyan, the snotty kid, and the other young children had already awoken from the state of Tao comprehension, and their gazes were filled with confusion, as if they'd experienced a bizarre and unreal dream. She couldn't help but smile and struck while the iron was hot. He started to explain what Tao insights were and how one should comprehend and grasp this sort of energy. The comprehension ability of all these young children was extremely outstanding, but their knowledge of Tao comprehension was exceedingly deficient, and they were like blank pieces of paper. In other words, what they lacked was knowledge. They had to obtain knowledge about this world and obtain knowledge about some basic techniques cultivators had to grasp when seeking the heaven Tao. For example, the differentiation between the levels of martial techniques and divine abilities, the comprehension and utilization of Tao insight, the difference between body refinement and chi refinement, and so on and so forth. Simply speaking, they had to obtain knowledge about the difference between the systems of cultivation and the various information contained within the various cultivation systems. In the 3 dimensions, all this was the most basic knowledge that was practically general knowledge. Every single cultivator would know this by heart before they even started cultivating, and there was utterly no need for anyone to teach them all this. But to these people that had been forgotten in the 9th hell, these things were things that they desperately needed to grasp. Otherwise, even if they were able to leave this place successfully and arrive in the outside world, they would be unable to fit in and would find it impossible to survive. Through his observation during these past few days, Xianxia had already deeply understood this. So he didn't directly pass down any formidable cultivation techniques when teaching these young children, and he spoke from the most basic cultivation systems. His voice was warm and clear, and he used terms that were clear, easy to understand, and filled with wit. He didn't blindly imbue them with knowledge, but displayed the meaning of what he spoke of through various vivid methods. The eyes of Xiaoyan and the other young children were wide open while they carried serious and attentive expressions, and they were fascinated by what Xianxia spoke of. Even those youths that lay prone outside the fence held their breaths in concentration. None of them spoke another word as all of them have given their entire attentions to what Xianxia was speaking about, and it seemed as if a window had been opened before them, allowing them to see another world. The miraculous laws of the heaven Tao existed within the perfected cultivation systems of this world, and these cultivation systems were numerous like the stars in the Milky Way. A perfect and precise cultivation system contained spirit medicine, pill refinement, equipment refinement, puppets, and various other knowledge. All of this was strange and unusual, gorgeous and vast, and it caused their hearts to surge from hearing this while they pondered swiftly and almost forgot their own existence. On the other side, Mengwei and Imoya had fallen into silence as well. Xianxia's voice was like the sound of nature, and it plucked their heartstrings, causing them to be carried far away and be unable to restrain themselves. At this moment, the entire campsite was so silent and only Xianxia's clear voice was drifting in the air. His clear and easy-to-understand words were like the profound tune of the Grand Tao, and it caused everyone to seem as if they were intoxicated. This scene was as if a saint was speaking about the Tao and the gods were explaining the problems that puzzled everyone, and the atmosphere imperceptibly carried a solemn and divine feeling. Xianxia didn't notice that he seemed to have become the center of attention for everyone present here. While he explained this knowledge that was the most basic, clear, and easy to understand, a different sort of feeling surged into his heart as well, causing him to be lost in thought and seem to have comprehended something. The Grand Tao moved to simplicity, and discarding all complications was the path to the true Grand Tao. The most basic things were the foundation stones of everything, and they were like the source of the river, the source of the Grand Tao. At this moment, as he explained these basic things, it was like him walking through the path of cultivation once more, and the bumps and winds on this road allowed him to obtain a different sort of comprehension. Xianxia knew very clearly that perhaps this sort of comprehension would be unable to help him recover his cultivation. But so long as he did recover his cultivation, it would surely be able to allow him to walk on an ever steadier path and go even further. If it was said that the tribulation during the rebirth realm was a transformation and sublimation of the cultivation, then everything he was doing right now was like he was experiencing the cycle of life and breaking through. When he thought all of this through, Xianxia suddenly had an open and confident feeling in his heart, and he was filled with anticipation towards his path of cultivation in the future. Before long, Xianxia had stood up and stopped teaching. Every single day, these clansmen of the ninth hell that had their homes destroyed and were forced to leave spent their days through long travels, and they were only able to stop moving and empty out a period of time for these young children and youths to train when they rested. Now it was already time to set out. According to their usual habit, Mengwei and Emoya would lead those guards and children at this moment to pack up and organize everything to prepare to leave. However, at this moment the entire campsite was silent. Even though Xianxia had stopped teaching, no one had woken from their deep contemplation. Obviously, they were all trying their best to digest all the knowledge they'd heard from Xianxia. A wisp of a smile couldn't help but suffuse the corners of his mouth when he saw this. He knew that his first class had already served its purpose. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before the simple and hot-blooded ninth hell clansman would completely accept him. In this way, he would be able to complete what the old priest entrusted him with in a better and easier manner. "Friend, thank you." The central tent was opened as the aged and emaciated old priest walked out, and he knelt on the ground with a solemn and serious expression as he kowtowed with gratitude to Xianxia. His devoted expression and the ancient method he used caused it to seem like the method used when praying to the gods during a sacrifice. It caused Xianxia to be shocked in his heart and be deeply moved, and it aroused a strange feeling in him. Xianxia walked forward and helped the old man on the ground up before he said seriously, "Don't worry, my life was saved by the ninth hell tribe. So long as I'm still alive, I'll surely not fail to live up to this kindness." The old priest laughed with gratification. He patted Xianxia's hand and didn't say anything else. He knew that it was already sufficient that he was able to obtain such a promise from Xianxia, and the fate of the ninth hell tribe might change because of this promise. The river of hell surged mightily and violently like a roaring black dragon, and shocking waves struck the banks, causing it to seem extremely dangerous. The clansmen of the ninth hell tribe were moving along this river at this moment. Emoya led 3 guards to open the way in the front, and they played the role of the vanguard. Mengwei and another 5 guards stayed at the back of the group instead to stay on guard against those xenorace enemies of theirs that might catch up to them. Xianxia walked at the center of the group. He noticed that once they started moving, those youths would seem as if they'd become a different person. Every 10 people formed a team, and there was a total of 8 teams. All of them had vigilant expressions and strong postures as they guarded the sides of the group. Every single move they made was uniform and highly disciplined, and they seemed like an army. Even though there were only a few of them, they revealed the aura of elites who'd experienced hundreds of battles. An army? Xianxia was stunned as a bold thought appeared suddenly in his mind. If I were to make those disorganized cultivators and organize them into an army, then exactly how formidable would the explosive force converged by this be? If such an army was fully well-trained, followed orders unconditionally, and had a commander that was skilled in planning to personally direct them, their combat strength will probably become even more formidable, right? Moreover, if this army completely consisted of sword cultivators, what extent would its offensive strength attain? The more he thought about it, the more excited Xianxia became, and he was slightly eager to test this sort of battle placement. In the past, when the powers of the cultivation world went against each other, practically all of them were a scattered collision, and they were like swarm of locusts that covered the heavens and the earth as they fought in a disorderly manner. So the side with the more experts would occupy the advantageous position. Practically no one had thought about organizing cultivators into an army, utilizing discipline to restrain them and orders to direct them, and it was to use a whole to replace individuals and undergo a new form of battle. The thought was that the disposition of cultivators was too undisciplined as they pursued freedom and being unrestrained. So unless it was a command of their seniors in the sect, they would utterly not obey the orders of anyone. Coupled with the higher a cultivator's cultivation gets, the stronger the might the cultivator grasped, they were capable of plucking the moon from the sky, overturning oceans and annihilating a city in the blink of an eye, so they utterly looked down upon a group battle method like an army. So up until now, it was practically impossible to see an army made of cultivators in the cultivation world. But Xianxia didn't think like this. In his opinion, 10 Violet Palace Realm cultivators might not be able to defeat a Golden Hall Realm cultivator. But if these 10 Violet Palace Realm cultivators were organized into a team that were provided with similar magic treasures and obtained excellent and effective training that allowed them to tacitly cooperate with each other from a distance. In this way, even if they were unable to defeat a Golden Hall Realm cultivator, it was sufficient to draw the enormous gap between them closer, and it wouldn't be impossible for it to end in a draw. It was even to the extent that Xianxia was imagining how if he was able to reorganize earthly immortal realm experts, or even heavenly immortals and gods into armies, then they would absolutely be capable of sweeping through the myriad of worlds in the universe. Up until the moment the group set up camp, Xianxia was still deducing all this, and he seemed as if he'd fallen into madness. "Uncle Xianxia, it's time to teach us how to train." Suddenly, the snotty kid ran over and spoke while sucking his finger. Xianxia instantly returned to his senses. When he raised his eyes to look over, he noticed that those young children were already waiting at the center of the campsite, and it wasn't just them. Even those youths were standing there while waiting for him to teach. After the first lesson ended yesterday, these youths had already been subdued by Xianxia's deep and profound knowledge, and they stopped going against him and had started to try to accept him. The scene before him was the best example. These youths had traveled for an entire day, yet even though they were exhausted, they were still unable to conceal their excitement when they recalled everything from yesterday, so they charged over at the first possible moment with the intention of receiving Xianxia's guidance. Xianxia wasn't surprised by this. "From this lesson onward, I intend to change the method of training. It'll be able to make all of you become even more strong in a short period of time. Do you want to learn it?" Xianxia swept all those youths with his gaze as he spoke. "Yes." Everyone replied in unison without the slightest hesitation. Xianxia nodded and started to reorganize them. There were a total of 76 youths and 13 young children, and their cultivations weren't uniform. The only thing they had in common was that all of them were body refiners. Under Xianxia's arrangement, all these youths and young children were temporarily divided into 2 batches. One batch was formed from those suitable to body refinement and occupied 60 people, and they were named the Violet Lightning Camp. All of them were youths older than 12 and below 15 years of age. The other batch was formed from those suitable to Qi refinement and occupied 29 people, and they were named the Azure Frost Camp. It consisted of those 13 young children and 16 youths around the age of 10. Before long, Xianxia divided the 60 youths of the Violet Lightning Camp into 3 small teams. Every single team consisted of 20 people, and they each selected a team leader that were respectively Blackie, Scarface, and Baldy. On the other hand, the Azure Frost Camp was similarly divided into 3 teams. 2 teams of 10 and 1 team of 9. This was the first time Xianxia had tried to carry out this type of army organizing. It didn't go too smoothly in the beginning, but along with the organizing of teams being carried out ceaselessly, the light in Xianxia's eyes grew even brighter as his actions became more systematic, causing his organization of groups to become gradually smoother. At the same time, an aura of confidence silently effused out from him. This wasn't a sudden impulse, because doing this would firstly be able to fully utilize the discipline these youths had formed since a long time ago, and secondly, it allowed him to teach them according to their aptitudes and allow them to bring forth their potential. In next to no time, a messy team gradually took shape. "What's he doing?" Xianxia frowned. Originally, the lesson from yesterday had made her view of Xianxia change greatly, but seeing him not teaching properly but actually organizing teams as if he was playing a game caused her to instantly feel slight displeasure. Perhaps he has another objective. He's someone from the outside world, and his knowledge is far from something we can compare to. "Xianxia, there's no need to get too flustered. Just watch silently from the side," said Meng Wei with a smile. "Humph. So strange. It's truly inconceivable. I wonder if everyone in the outside world is like him." Xianxia puckered her lips. Even though she spoke like this, her gaze didn't leave Xianxia for a moment because she was similarly curious about what he would be able to achieve by doing this. "From today onward, I'll pass down even more formidable cultivation techniques, martial techniques, and divine abilities to all of you. Xianxia looked at the youths and young children that stood in an orderly manner before him, and he said with a clear voice, "Do all of you want to learn?" Yes. A single sentence had drawn out the yearning of these youths to become stronger. All right, my requirement is extremely simple. Not only must all of you become stronger yourselves, you must even help those in your team and battle camp to become stronger. Only in this way would all of you be able to obtain all of this. Xianxi's gaze was like bolts of lightning, and he held his hands behind his back while his back remained ramrod straight, causing him to carry an impressive and dignified manner. I, on the other hand, will set up some rewards, and I'll distribute the rewards to all of you based on the overall performance of your respective groups. The group with the best performance will be able to obtain an additional prize, and the group with the worst performance will suffer punishment instead. As he spoke, Xianxia flicked his sleeve, causing a ray of light to flash before a large pile of spirit pills that seemed like a tiny hill appeared on the ground. These spirit pills flowed with the glow of treasures, were suffused with spirit energy, and emitted a refreshing fragrance that was intoxicating. Medicinal pills. These are surely the medicinal pills that Uncle Xianxia spoke of yesterday. Supposedly, these medicinal pills carried various exceedingly miraculous effects after they're consumed. The eyes of the youths were instantly stared wide open and become extremely burning while their breathing became heavy as well. Even the distant Meng Wei, Emoya, and those guards that protected the surroundings of the campsite opened their eyes wide with disbelief as they looked at the scene before them. They were too shocked. How could they have imagined that Xianxia actually carried so many spirit pills in his possession? Xianxia was extremely pleased with their reaction because one could only be persistent when one wanted something, and then he said, "All of these are merely a small portion of the rewards, and they're far from being considered anything significant. So long as all of you put on an outstanding display, I'll give all of you even more generous rewards. Is merely a small portion? Those that make a good display will obtain even shocking rewards?" Merely a single sentence was like a piece of bait that was impossible to refuse, and it drew out the yearning in the deepest depths of their hearts, causing them to be excited to the point their eyes glimmered with greed. Moreover, after a period of time, the Violet Lightning Camp and Azure Frost Camp will decide a victor amongst them. At that time, I'll personally prepare a pleasant surprise that none of you will expect, and it will be given to the winner. Xianxi's words were like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, and he made all these youths seethe with excitement. Their hot blood burned as they rubbed their palms together, and they truly wished for nothing more than to have a battle right now. However, I have to remind all of you that you can stop at nothing when dealing with your enemies, but you absolutely can't do that to your companions. Xianxi's expression suddenly became cold as he said with a low voice, "Remember, competition is competition, but if anyone dares to do something that's harmful to another in secret for the sake of some rewards, then don't blame me for being ruthless." Even though he'd temporarily lost his cultivation, the impressive and dignified manner Xianxia had tempered from the blood and flames of battles during all these years was still present, and the oppressive deterrent force in his voice was something that anyone could feel. The youths seemed as if they were doused with cold water, and they instantly returned to their senses. "Uncle Xianxia, don't worry. We only have our clansmen in the tribe, and will absolutely not do things such as fighting each other." Stone, who possessed calmness and maturity that far exceeded his age, replied in a loud voice, "Right, we'll absolutely not fight each other." The other youths shouted loudly as well with firm expressions that revealed stubbornness and resolution. "All right, then all of you must remember what you've said today. Not only must all of you remember it now, but even if you enter the outside world in the future, you must firmly remember these words," said Xianxia. The youths didn't say anything further, and they puckered their lips while nodding fiercely. In the distance, Emoya's beautiful brows knit together as she spoke with displeasure. "This fellow is simply making trouble out of nothing. How could he speak like that about our clansmen? When have the members of our 9th Hell Tribe even fought each other?" Meng Wei seemed to be lost in thought instead, and his eyes were suffused with a wisp of appreciation as he said, "Xianxia has done well because it's always wise to be safe. The outside world is unlike the ninth hell we reside in, and it's filled with various temptations, and Xianxia did this for the sake of those little fellows. He wants them to understand that no matter what temptation they face, the lives of their clansmen and companions are the most precious. Xianxia was stunned as Meng Wei's words caused the slight ill feelings towards Xianxia in her heart to vanish without a trace. She knew extremely clearly about how honest and kind-hearted her clansmen were. Their hearts were pure like a blank sheet of paper, and they didn't know what things such as benefit, betrayal, and fighting amongst themselves were. But what if they entered the outside world? Would they still be able to maintain this pure and clean heart? Xianxia was unable to be sure. So Meng Wei's words allowed her to quickly understand Xianxia's intentions, and she couldn't help but arouse a slightly complicated feeling in her heart. Could it be that I've really misunderstood this fellow? A wisp of confusion suffused her eyes. Actually, when she thought about it, the reason she was so hostile towards Xianxia was completely because of herself. She was prejudiced by her first impression and thought Xianxia was utterly useless trash that wasted the food and medicinal materials of their clan. And it was even to the extent that she wished for nothing more than to kill Xianxia on many occasions. But everything that had happened during this past few days had proven that Xianxia wasn't just not a piece of trash. He was an extraordinary genius that was rare to come by. Under his guidance, Xiaoyan and the other young children had comprehended Tao insight. Under his explanation, their clansmen had obtained knowledge of a new world and a completely new cultivation system. When she calmed down and thought about it, Xianxia noticed to her shock that the ninth hell tribe she was familiar with seemed to be silently undergoing a change because of Xianxia's arrival, and everything seemed to be transforming towards a certain direction. Exactly what sort of figure is this fellow? Xianxia sighed lightly in her heart as the gaze she shot at Xianxia had become much softer and brighter, and it didn't contain the detest and hostility from before any longer. Forget it. So long as he acts wholeheartedly for the good of the tribe, then who cares who he is? When she thought up to here, Xianxia let go of an enormous load on her mind, and her entire body felt relaxed. Xianxia was still giving instructions. His voice had become heavy, resounding, and revealed an awe-inspiring feeling. Truthfully speaking, as far as I'm concerned, all of your strengths are horribly weak, and you're even inferior to some 8- or 9-year-old children in the dark reverie. It isn't that I'm intentionally putting all of you down, but once all of you arrive at the dark reverie, it would be absolutely impossible to gain a foothold with your strengths. The gazes of the youths were gradually replaced with flames of rage as their pride had suffered an extremely heavy blow and trampling. This caused them to be furious, and all of them clenched their fists tightly while their young faces flushed red. Very good. Xianxia was rather satisfied because having a sense of shame was far better than being unconcerned. It's just like when one conducted business. After trying one's best to cut down the price, one had to give the other party some benefits as well, because only then would one be able to improve the other party's enthusiasm. Xianxia had already started giving them benefits, and he'd attained the objective of putting them down. Next, it was time to go all out. Let me ask all of you once again, do you want to become strong? Xianxia shouted loudly. Yes. The youths had practically roared this out, and they spoke resolutely. Good. From now onward, all of you will begin a different life, and you'll be reborn in a short period of time. All of you don't have to worry about the lack of food, nor do all of you have to think about the assault of enemies. Xianxia said word by word. All of you only have to worry about if you're able to satisfy me. All the youths revealed ruthless expression, and it was as if they were saying, Uncle Xianxia, just you wait and see. This was Xianxia's second class, organizing everyone and setting up a system of reward and punishment. At the same time, he drew out the surging aspirations in the hearts of the youths. After he finished teaching the class, Xianxia called Blackie, Scarface, Baldy, Rock, Xiaoyan, and another youth called Axiu to his tent. Blackie, Scarface, and Baldy were the team leaders of the 3 teams in the Violet Lightning camp, and they each commanded a small team of 19 people. On the other hand, Rock, Axiu, and Xiaoyan were the team leaders of the 3 teams in the Azure Frost camp. Each of them commanded a team of 9 people, whereas Xiaoyan only had 8 people in her team, and all of them were young children. At this moment, All 6 of them stood nervously before Xianxia. In their eyes, Xianxia wasn't that sickly fellow they were familiar with any longer, and he was an extremely dignified and impressive chieftain, causing them to unconsciously feel a trace of reverence when standing before him. Execute everything all of you know, and don't leave anything out. Xianxia's order wasn't complicated. Yes, the youths acknowledged. They'd already started to slowly learn how to match Xianxia's rhythm, and it was extremely simple. Do whatever Xianxia said, and it was sufficient so long as they attained the requirements and satisfied him. They started to display their cultivation techniques and moves one by one. Actually, the cultivation techniques they cultivated were all the same because they'd learned it from Meng Wei. But Xianxia wasn't looking at the moves, but the style and characteristics revealed by their moves. Only in this way would he be able to pass down different cultivation techniques according to their characteristics. As the saying goes, teach students in accordance with their aptitude. After all of them finished, Xianxia closed his eyes and pondered for a moment before allowing them to leave. On the next day, Xianxia called the 6 team leaders over once more while the tribe journeyed forward, and he passed a jade slip to each of them. Every single jade slip recorded a body refinement or chi refinement cultivation technique, and all of them were top techniques Xianxia had prepared according to their physique, natural endowments, and battle style. During these years, Xianxia had killed countless enemies and was from an extraordinary power like the 9 Radiant Sword sect, so he'd gained possession of countless techniques a long time ago. Body refinement, chi refinement, divine ability, martial technique, Tao art. He had everything one could expect to find in large quantities. He'd even directly thrown some cultivation techniques directly into the Buddha's pagoda upon obtaining it because he noticed they were useless to him. Now, all of these cultivation techniques were finally useful. Subsequently, Xianxia guided them for some time and explained the secrets within the cultivation technique to the point all the little fellows committed them to heart before allowing all the little fellows to leave. Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief. But he didn't waste time, and he took the jade pot out and poured a drop of divine wine out before starting to temper his body refinement cultivation once again. According to what the old priest said, those xeno-race experts hadn't given up on pursuing them. In other words, even though they were moving forward swiftly every single day, it was impossible to guarantee that they wouldn't encounter xeno-race enemies. The thing that caused Xianxia to frown the most was the old priest wasn't sure where the exit that led to the outside world was, and the old priest only said that they would be able to arrive in the outside world by following along this dangerous river of hell. However, how long was the river of hell? Where was the end of its flow? The old priest didn't know because this river was truly too long, and it wound through the entire 9th hell. Even their ancestors had never found its end. The lurking danger, unknown future, the safety of everyone in the tribe, the recovery of his own cultivation. All of this caused Xianxia's nerves to be strained, and he didn't dare continue wasting any time. Blackie and the others returned absent-mindedly to the campsite while their minds were filled with the profound and mysterious techniques, and it drew all their attention. This caused them to seem as if they'd been possessed. They were either frowning, muttering, or walking around. No matter if it was their actions or appearances, it revealed a slightly strange feeling. This scene quickly drew the attention of the other youths. Ha! Looks at Blackie. This fellow is actually scratching his feet, and he's doing it so obliviously. Heh! Didn't you see Baldy? He's slapping his forehead over and over again. Even his head has become swollen, yet he doesn't know pain. Hey, what do all of you think happened to them? All of them are so strange. Could it be that Uncle Xianxia executed a technique to draw out their souls? Don't talk nonsense. Uncle Xianxia is so good to us, so how could he harm us? I'll beat you up if you continue talking nonsense. Why be so serious? I was only joking. As they looked at Blackie and the other 5, those youths couldn't help but be curious and whisper in discussion. Such a situation continued for an entire day, and only when the group set out once more did Blackie and the others finally awaken from that strange state. All of them were filled with spirit, had bright eyes, excited expressions, and it was difficult to conceal their joy. It's too formidable. If I cultivate according to this cultivation technique, then my cultivation will absolutely be able to obtain a tremendous improvement. They exclaimed with shock in their hearts. Comprehending the cultivation technique Chun she passed down allowed them to have a similar feeling, and that was the technique was strong, very strong, too strong. If it was before, could any of them have imagined that there would actually be such profound techniques in the world? They returned to their respective teams and passed down the techniques within the jade slip to their team members without holding back in the slightest, and they even recounted all the guidance Chun she gave them. Because all of them firmly remembered what Chun she had said. It wasn't much if only they became strong, and only by making their own team and battle camp become strong as well would they be able to obtain the rewards he prepared. Half a day later, Meng Wei and Mo Ye noticed to their shock that all the youths and young children in the tribe seemed as if they were intoxicated. All of them had narrowed eyes and were either in deep contemplation or being absent-minded. Practically none of them was normal. Even the speed of the tribe's advancement had become much slower because of this. What has happened? Mo Ye pulled a guard over and asked with a frown, and her voice already couldn't help but carry a wisp of worry. Earlier, she was opening up the path at the front of the group while Meng Wei stood on guard at the back of the group. So they didn't notice all of this, causing her to think that the children had caught some sort of disease. Meng Wei raised his eyes to look at the guard as well, and he was slightly displeased. The orderly group was in a mess right now, and he was unable to stand the sight of it. Their comprehending cultivation techniques passed down to them by Chieftain Chen Shi. Based on how it looks, they seem to be exceedingly extraordinary. The guard spoke with an envious expression. Comprehending cultivation techniques? Meng Wei and Mo Ye glanced at each other, and both of them were stunned. What sort of cultivation techniques would make these children become so entranced? Both of them couldn't endure their curiosity and called Blackie and the other 5 over, and they found out about everything after inquiring briefly. Moreover, even the jade slips Chun she had given Blackie and the others had fallen into their hands. Is it really so miraculous? Asked Mo Ye. Blackie and the others nodded repeatedly, and they didn't conceal their respect and admiration towards Chun Shi in the slightest. Humph! Watch out. If you dare deceive me, then I'll beat all of you little kids. Mo Ye glared at them before raising her hand to take a jade slip. Let me see exactly what profundities it possesses to actually cause such a commotion. Before she could even finish speaking, the nearby Meng Wei already seemed as if he was struck by lightning, and he cried out in shock. Meng Wei had a steady, calm, and wise bearing, and there was practically nothing that could cause his feelings to fluctuate too greatly. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to assume the role of the chieftain and deeply receive the support of everyone. However, he'd exclaimed with shock at this moment, and it was obvious how great the shock in his heart was. In this way, it caused Mo Ye to be even more curious towards the content of the jade slip, and she couldn't help but size it up. After a short moment, her eyes lit up abruptly as her red lips trembled, and she seemed to want to exclaim with shock, yet had forcefully endured it before continuing to inspect the jade slip. After another short moment passed, her entire body trembled while her ample and alluring chest rose and fell rapidly, and it drew out a breathtaking curve that caused the eyeballs of the nearby guards to almost fall out. Even those youths were stunned by this scene as a wisp of burning heat arose in their hearts, and then their faces flushed red as they lowered their heads without daring to look at Mo Ye's proud figure any longer. Gradually, Mo Ye's breathing became rapid as her eyes grew brighter and brighter, and her entire body couldn't be restrained from trembling. She seemed to be holding a rare and precious treasure, causing her to be excited to the point she was on the verge of losing control of her feelings. Her beautiful jet-black hair was tied into a flowing ponytail, and she possessed a gorgeous appearance and a slender and hot figure. At this moment, she was entirely unaware that her rapid and tender breathing coupled with her hot figure that was trembling slightly struck an enormous blow on these youths that were filled with vigor and vitality. Meng Wei couldn't continue watching, and he coughed dryly before he said, Mo Ye, how is it? Mo Ye instantly returned to her senses, and then she took a deep breath before she said seriously, It's extremely formidable, and it's more than 10 times more formidable than the cultivation techniques we cultivated in the past. Blackie and the others heaved a sigh of relief in their hearts. The display their Auntie Mo Ye put on earlier caused them to feel extremely embarrassed, but they were stunned right after that. What? It's 10 times more formidable than the cultivation technique I cultivated in the past. Even though they knew clearly since the beginning that the cultivation technique they obtained from Uncle Chun she was extremely formidable and strong, but they never imagined that it would be so shocking that even Auntie Emoya gave it such a high valuation. Meng Wei sighed instead. Unfortunately, these cultivation techniques are only suitable to be cultivated by children, and they're extremely complete. If we cultivate it, it would only accomplish the opposite effect. Emoya's beautiful brows frowned, and she felt extremely regretful in her heart. The guard that had kept silent all along couldn't help but speak. What's so difficult about that? Wouldn't it be fine if we go look for Brother Chun Shi and ask for a cultivation technique as well? Emoya's eyes lit up, and then they dimmed down. Would he agree? Meng Wei shook his head and burst into laughter. It looks to me that you're embarrassed, right? Emoya glared her eyes wide open and glanced fiercely at Meng Wei before she puckered her lips. You speak so casually, yet aren't you the same? Meng Wei was stunned, and then he suddenly saw that guard sneaking off, causing him to be unable to refrain from frowning. What are you doing? I'm going to ask Brother Chun Shi to bestow a cultivation technique to me. The guard spoke with a distressed expression. If I continue delaying then it would probably be cleaned off by the others. Meng Wei and Emoya were astounded. Only now did they notice that numerous people were actually surrounded around Chun Shi, and all of them were the guards of the tribe. Some were waiting anxiously while scratching their heads, while some were beaming with smiles as they left, and he was extremely popular. He's truly a fellow that's impossible to see through. Exactly how many secrets do you think are concealed in his possession? Why do I feel that he seems to be capable of everything and nothing is too much for him? Emoya sighed lightly as she spoke with a faint voice. However, she didn't get a reply after waiting for a long time, and when she turned to look, she instantly gnashed her teeth with anger. Meng Wei, you spineless bastard! In the distance, Meng Wei had suddenly approached Chun Shi's side and had a smile on his face as he talked with Chun Shi. Damn it! You actually left me behind? Emoya stamped her feet fiercely as she muttered and walked over with a murderous look on her face. She split the crowd apart and directly arrived by Meng Wei's side. However, before she could even speak, the opposite Chun Shi had said with a warm smile, Miss Emoya, don't worry. I've already prepared a cultivation technique for you. As he spoke, Chun Shi passed a jade slip over. Obviously, it was just as he'd said, and he'd already prepared a suitable technique for Emoya to cultivate since the beginning. Emoya was stunned, and she forcefully swallowed the words that were about to escape her mouth. When faced with Chun Shi's warm and magnanimous gaze, she lowered her head and became slightly embarrassed instead. Everyone in the surroundings were stunned. Emoya had always been a fiery woman that was mature, calm, and capable. Who would have imagined that she would actually reveal such a delicate and embarrassed bearing? Emoya seemed to have noticed that something was off as well, and she instantly raised her head before fiercely sweeping the surroundings with her gaze until she forced them to not dare meet her gaze. Only then did she act poised and dignified as she received the jade slip. Thank you. I'll return this favor. As soon as she finished speaking, she'd already turned and left, and her ponytail swayed in a gorgeous arc. Chun Shi was stunned and felt extremely amused in his heart because he'd clearly seen the tip of Emoya's finger tremble lightly when she received the jade slip. Obviously, she wasn't as composed as she seemed on the outside. She's truly a woman that wants to keep a tough outward appearance. Chun Shi sighed as he shook his head, and he started to pass out cultivation techniques to the others. He knew very clearly that if he wanted to avoid the pursuit and destruction from the xenorace experts while allowing everyone to leave this ninth hell and arrive at the outside world safely, just his strength was far from enough. Not to mention he'd lost his chi refinement cultivation now, whereas his body refinement cultivation had only recovered to around golden core realm. Once he encountered some formidable figures, the consequences would be unimaginable. So he could only utilize the various cultivation techniques in his possession to strengthen the entire tribe because once every single one of them became stronger, they would be slightly safer. After he finished distributing the cultivation techniques, Chun Shi noticed the entire group seemed to be absent-minded. He knew their minds were immersed within the cultivation techniques they'd obtained, and he couldn't help but feel slightly amused. He sized up the surroundings before immediately ordering them to set up camp. Under these circumstances, it was obviously not suitable for them to continue moving forward. All right, all of you set your minds at ease and cultivate. Leave the food and guarding of the campsite to me. She knew that wasting the time of those guards and children at this moment was simply like a type of torment to them. So he could only assume the position of mess cook and guard. Everyone instantly beamed with joy, and they hurriedly seized every single minute to sit down cross-legged and comprehend the cultivation techniques with calmed hearts. No one spoke another word, nor was anyone idle. The entire campsite was silent as they were all immersed into their own cultivation techniques, and the yearning for strength that came from their hearts even caused she to be rather moved. He didn't disturb them, but silently left the campsite to arrive at the side of the River of Hell. The vast River of Hell's water surged and rumbled while shocking waves swept through the sky. It was extremely dangerous to the point even ferocious and vicious bone hawks didn't dare fly above the river, as they were deeply afraid of losing their lives to its waves. She stood at the bank of the river while a vertical eye suddenly opened up between his brows, and it gazed towards the bottom of the river. In next to no time, a wisp of shock suffused the corners of his mouth. This River of Hell was actually more than 300 kilometers deep, and it seemed like a bottomless abyss. Moreover, there were some auras of life that surged extremely at the bottom. As expected, I knew that there would surely be living beings where there is water, she muttered. As he spoke, the tremendous divine sense within his sea of consciousness had swiftly transformed into a large net that charged into the river. Rumble! After a short moment, the surface of the river roiled as sprayed out, and a few tens of large fishes that were 10 m long, large as a mountain, and covered in ink-black-colored scales were captured. These ink-black scaled large fish were hideous, and their mouths were filled with snow-white and sharp fangs. A swing of their tails caused a bang to resound out as space was struck to the point of trembling violently, and it vividly displayed their shocking strength. If it was a golden core realm cultivator instead, the cultivator would probably be smashed apart by the swing of its tail. But now, as soon as these few tens of large fish were captured, their souls were shattered completely by Xianxia's terrifying divine sense, and they directly fell to the ground. What strange and ferocious fish! Even though they're completely devoid of spirit energy, their strength, vital blood, and vital energy is seething and enormous to the extreme. They are simply comparable to body refiners at the rebirth realm. She exclaimed with shock before flicking his sleeve to put all these fish away, and then he turned around and left. Even though these ink-black scaled fish couldn't compare to spirit medicine, their meat contained shocking vital blood and vital energy, and it possessed an immeasurable magical effect for the tempering of the body and consolidation of the Tao foundation of those youths. Smoke curled up from the center of the campsite. An enormous bronze cauldron had been established here, and the milky white-colored meat soup within was gurgling and bubbling, while emitted a unique and sweet fragrance. It was rich and delicious to the extreme, and it caused one's mouth to water. She stood before the cauldron while he placed numerous spirit medicine in from time to time. The 7 profundity grass that loosened up the veins, green poria that nurtured true essence, crimson creamberry that eliminated the impurities within the body. All these spirit materials were obtained by him during these past few years, and were planted within the forest in the 4 symbols layer of the Buddha's pagoda. All of them were precious spirit medicines that consolidated the Tao foundation. Presently, he already had no use for these things, so it just happened that he could use them to help these youths cultivate. In next to no time, a tempting and wonderful fragrance that assaulted the nose flowed throughout every single inch of space in the campsite, and it aroused the appetite of everyone who smelt it. Growl! Growl! A string of strange sounds rose and fell in the surroundings. She turned around and saw the group of youths had opened their eyes and were staring fixedly at the delicious meat soup within the cauldron while drooling, and those strange sounds were coming from their stomachs. Aren't all of you going to continue cultivating? Asked Xianxia. The group of youths revealed silly smiles as they continued to stare at the cauldron, and they seemed like numerous hungry wolves that had set their sights of their prey, and it was simply even more painful than death if they didn't get to have a bite. Meng Wei, Emoya, and the other guards had surrounded him as well. On one side, they were tempted by the mouth-watering fragrance, and on the other hand, they were exclaiming in admiration at Xianxia's culinary skill. This cauldron of meat soup didn't just possess color, aroma, and taste. It even flowed with rich spirit energy and medicinal strength that assaulted the nose, and it caused their entire bodies to feel comfortable and light from just a whiff of it. Compared to this meat soup before them, they instantly felt that what they'd been eating in the past was simply utterly horrible, and it didn't deserve to be called food at all. "All right, you can eat." Xianxia put out the fire with a swing of his sleeve, and then he took down the furnace. Swish! His voice hadn't finished resounding out in the air when the group of youths that had already been tortured by their hunger to the point their eyes went red had swarmed over while screaming with joy. A sweet fragrance suffused the campsite. The tender and smooth texture of the black-scaled fish meat, coupled with various precious spirit medicines, caused it to be extremely tasty. And not only had this mixture not spoiled its taste, it even caused it to have a special and wonderful taste. When it entered the mouth, the flesh that was white like snow seemed to explode like bubbles as various wonderful tastes gushed onto one's taste buds before transforming into strands of warm flows that surged throughout the body. And it caused every single pore on one's body to feel an unprecedented feeling of enjoyment. No matter if it was those youths or guards, everyone in the campsite started eating with all their might. They seemed like hungry ghosts that had been reincarnated as they ate voraciously, and their faces were covered in expressions of satisfaction. "It's too tasty." They simply didn't dare believe that such tasty food actually existed in the world. The jade white and tasty fish meat, the thick and rich meat soup, and the brightly colored spirit medicines were all so wonderful and exceedingly tasty. Moreover, there was copious amounts of spirit energy within it, and they practically didn't have to refine the spirit energy before it transformed into a warm flow that surged throughout their body and their own purest energy. This caused them to exclaim with even more admiration, and they deeply realized how extraordinary Xianxia's cooking was. In next to no time, those youths were unable to eat anymore. Their entire bodies flickered with spirit energy while their faces were rosy, and they started roaring without end, and were even unable to refrain from running madly within the campsite. Xianxia hurriedly asked them to sit down cross-legged and cultivate. They'd consumed too much, and the medicinal strength within the food was roiling and seething within their bodies because their bodies didn't have sufficient time to absorb it yet. So if they still didn't refine it themselves, the medicinal strength would be wasted for nothing. Not long after, Mengwei, Emoya, and the others were unable to endure it any longer, and they sat down cross-legged before circulating their cultivation techniques with all their might while refining the tremendous medicinal strength. OM! A wave of strange fluctuations arose as Xiaoyan's entire body trembled, and her body refinement cultivation that she'd just come into contact with for less than a day had repeatedly increased explosively to advancing into the congenital realm in one go. But Xianxia wasn't surprised. Xiaoyan possessed an extremely shocking natural endowment and natural talent, coupled with the exceedingly solid foundation that had been established since she was small and the food he'd cooked. Being able to attain such accomplishments was success that came with the right conditions. Before long, all the youths and young children broke through, and for a time, the air above the entire campsite shook and droned while vital energy shot into the sky, causing it to be a rather magnificent scene. "I've broken through. I've sought bitterly for it for almost 10 years, and I've actually advanced into the nether transformation realm in one go now. Ha ha ha!" Suddenly, Meng Wei roared with laughter, and his elated voice was like the roar of a dragon that shook the surroundings. Bang! His voice hadn't finished resounding out in the air when the space around Emoya suddenly started shaking violently, and a shocking airflow rumbled out towards the surroundings while her aura became countless times more formidable than before. "Damn it! I'm a step slower than you once again." Emoya opened her eyes and glared angrily at Meng Wei before laughing, and her beautiful face was like a blooming flower that was dazzling and resplendent. Obviously, she was exceedingly pleasantly surprised from being able to advance as well. At this moment, Xianxia was slightly astonished. After all, the medicinal strength contained within the meat soup was targeted towards tempering the bodies of the youths, and its greatest effect was towards consolidating one's foundation. But Emoya and Meng Wei were actually able to utilize this to break through and advance to the nether transformation realm in body refinement in one go, and even Xianxia felt that this was slightly unbelievable. After all, he'd already found out earlier that because the spirit energy in the ninth hell had dried up, the clansmen of the ninth hell tribe were all body refiners. They trudged the path of attaining divinity through the body, and they relied on tempering their bodies to improve their strengths. But all their cultivations weren't high. The reason was that even though they were of the school of fiend god body refinement, once one attains a certain level in body refinement, one would need to rely on the Tao insights one had grasped to break through to an even higher realm. He clearly remembered that Meng Wei and Emoya hadn't comprehended any Tao insight until now, yet they were actually able to break through to the nether transformation realm. Then there was only a single reason for this, and that was their body had already been tempered to an extremely heaven-defying extent. The meaning of attaining divinity through the body was to not rely on any external forces. During the primeval times, the true fiend god clan disdained to comprehend and grasp grand Tao profundities because what they were doing was defying the heavens and breaking through the shackles of the heaven Tao with the intention of being supreme above the grand Tao. That was the most ancient path of body refinement, and it was similarly the most difficult and obscure path. After experiencing the passage of countless years, this sort of path of body refinement had already been abandoned a long time ago and was obliterated in history, and it was replaced by a variety of body refinement cultivation techniques. Presently, even if it was in the entire 3 dimensions, it was impossible to find any body refiner that walked on this path. Now Xianxia had a strong feeling that Meng Wei and Emoya were walking on this exceedingly ancient path of body refinement. Similarly, this was the purest school of fiend god body refinement. A strong impulse suddenly surged into his heart, and he wanted to see their body refinement technique because even if his body refinement cultivation were to recover, it would be stuck at the perfection stage of the rebirth realm. Even though it would only be a step away from the nether transformation realm, it was so far like the gap between heaven and man. If he was able to obtain some experience from Meng Wei and the others, then it would surely be greatly beneficial towards his advancement. Xianxia hesitated for a moment yet was unable to restrain his curiosity in the end, and he told Meng Wei of his thoughts. "You want to draw experience from my body refinement technique?" Meng Wei was stunned, and then he laughed generously. "Of course. I almost thought the body refinement technique of our ninth hell tribe had already fallen behind by countless of years and become an ancient thing that no one is interested in." Xianxia said with a serious expression, "All profound techniques have their own source. Aren't body refinement techniques sourced from the primeval fiend god clan? If one is able to view its essence, then it would be an exceedingly great fortune to any body refiner." Meng Wei restrained his smile and nodded seriously. "Brother Xianxia, what you've said has hit directly at the point. Exactly, even though the times are changing and everything in the world is undergoing a tremendous change, the principle remains the same. Some ancient things are worthy to be learned and inherited." Subsequently, Meng Wei passed over an ancient beast's skin to Xianxia with a serious expression. Rows of primeval text written by fiend gods were actually recorded on the beast's skin. The numerous words were so ancient, obscure, and mysterious. They didn't seem like words, but symbols that were branded with the profundities of the Grand Tao, and they emitted a vast and divine aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. Merely these rows of fiend god writing caused Xianxia's mind to tremble, and he sensed the purest aura of shaman energy that was boundlessly vast and peerlessly powerful. At this moment, he finally dared confirm that this ninth hell tribe was surely made up of the descendants of primeval fiend gods, and it was even to the extent that the ninth hell tribe might have come from the fiend god clan that had been obliterated in the annals of history since a long time ago. If it was really so, then it would be too shocking. While he was in the door of profundity, the tiny cauldron had once said the calamity of fiend gods that affected the 3 dimensions had erupted during the primordial era. After that vast calamity, the fiend god clan was completely obliterated, and there wasn't a single clansman of theirs that had appeared in the world after that. When he thought up to here, she couldn't help but exclaim with shock. He knew that if this news were to be spread to the dark reverie, then it would surely cause a great wave that shook the 3 dimensions. Remnants of the ninth hell? Who would have imagined that the descendants of the Fiend God clan would actually be present in this ninth hell that has been abandoned by the Grand Tao and forgotten by the three dimensions? Xianxia sighed endlessly with emotion in his heart. But in the next moment, all the thoughts in his mind had vanished instantaneously, and his gaze was like a bolt of lightning as it swept coldly towards the front of the campsite. Under the envelopment of his divine sense, there were two figures dashing towards here swiftly from a few thousand kilometers away. Both of them had slender figures and snow-white wings behind their back. There was practically no need for Xianxia to be suspicious, as he knew they were surely xenorace experts. Because while he was at the primeval battlefield, one of the 4 xenorace experts he saw there had such an appearance. That expert was called Luo Chuan, and he was from the Wing World. Obviously, these two were surely from the Wing World as well. Xianxia couldn't help but frown when he thought up to here, and the vital energy in his entire body carried a murderous aura. Brother Xianxia, has something happened? Meng Wei noticed the changes in Xianxia's aura, and his eyes couldn't help but narrow as he asked with a low voice. There are 2 enemies approaching swiftly. Xianxia spoke quickly. The expressions of Meng Wei and the nearby Moya sank when they heard this, and their eyes revealed a wisp of undisguised and deep-rooted hatred while their killing intent was dense to the extreme. I'll go kill them, Meng Wei spoke coldly. At this moment, the youths within the campsite were cultivating while their cultivations were in a period of swift advancement. He didn't wish for their enemies to attack and disturb the cultivation of the youths. Big brother Meng Wei, kill one and bring another back alive, said Xianxia abruptly. The appearance of these 2 xenorace experts was too strange, and they'd actually arrived at the front of the group. This caused him to faintly feel that something was off. All right. Meng Wei instantly understood Xianxia's thoughts and nodded. He stepped on the ground with the tip of his foot, and then his entire body was like an attacking cheetah that moved with a strange rhythm and instantly vanished in the campsite. Don't worry. Meng Wei and I have killed countless xenorace experts all along the way, and we know their strengths like the back of our hands. The enemy will absolutely be captured easily with Meng Wei making a move. Moya couldn't help but console when she saw Xianxia's brows knit together tightly. I'm not worried about this. Xianxia shook his head and said after pondering for a while, I suspect that there ought to be numerous enemies lying in ambush at the direction we are heading. What? Moya's beautiful face turned grim as she understood the severity of the situation. If it was really as Xianxia had said, then it would absolutely be a great disaster to their entire tribe. After all, there were too many children in the tribe that hadn't matured into adults. If they were to really encounter a large batch of xenorace experts, then it was utterly impossible to take care of the safety of everyone by merely relying on their strengths. Let's wait first, and we'll make arrangements after Big Brother Meng Wei returns. At this moment, Xianxia had calmed down instead. Everything about the enemies was still unknown, and this wasn't the time to get flustered. Moya nodded, and she couldn't help but raise her eyes to size Xianxia up while she said in her heart, I never imagined that this fellow would be even more composed than me. Could it be that he has experienced more hardships than me? She knew that this sort of bearing to take a tense situation calmly was something that was utterly impossible to learn without experiencing violent storms and waves. Swoosh! In the next moment, Meng Wei had already returned while carrying a fainted xenorace expert in his hand. From the beginning until the end, only a few tens of breaths of time had passed, and the speed he achieved all this in was astonishing. The formidableness of Meng Wei's strength was obvious from this, and even Xianxia was extremely surprised in his heart. Now, let me ask exactly how much of the situation he knows about. Clang! Moya pulled out a dagger before piercing it into the person's thigh without the slightest hesitation, and it carried out a string of crimson-red blood. Moya had obviously killed countless xenorace experts all along the way, causing her to be exceedingly experienced and resolute in action. Under the bloody and oppressive pressure she emitted, this expert from the Wing World caved in next to no time. It turned out that there were an entire 36 batches of xenorace teams trying to stop and kill the 9th Hell Tribe. Every single batch consisted of around 300 people, and they were respectively from different worlds from outside the 3 dimensions. For example, the xenorace expert before them was from the Wing World. These 36 batches of Xenorace teams had a Violet Crystal rank Xenorace expert as their leader, 10 Gold rank experts, 100 Silver rank experts, and 200 Bronze rank experts. If they were summed up together, the Xenorace had actually invested an entire 10,000 plus people to stop and kill the 9th Hell Tribe, and amongst them were 36 Violet Crystal rank experts, 360 Gold rank experts, and an even more terrifying number of Bronze and Silver rank experts. On the other hand, the 9th Hell Tribe only possessed a little over 100 clansmen, and 90% of those were youths and young children. When both these forces were compared, there was an extremely great disparity just in terms of number, and it was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. Not to mention there were so many experts within their forces. The reason these Xenorace experts were madly trying to kill the 9th Hell Tribe was merely so that the news of what happened here wouldn't be leaked. The reason was extremely simple. Even if the 9th Hell was abandoned by the 3 dimensions and the Heaven Tao since a long time ago, it was still situated within the 3 dimensions now, and it was only separated from the outside world. On the other hand, these Xenorace experts had taken the 9th Hell to be a gangplank, a campsite for them to enter the 3 dimensions because only here would their identities not be noticed by the laws of the Heaven Tao in the 3 dimensions, and it could be said to be extremely safe. Moreover, they were only the vanguard team for entering the 9th Hell, and there would be countless Xenorace experts surging into the 9th Hell over a very long period of time in the future. Their goal was similarly simple as well. It was to seize the opportunity of the 3 dimensions being in an upheaval to invade the 3 dimensions in one go. All along the way, Meng Wei and Emoya had killed countless Xenorace experts, and they knew about this long ago. So they didn't panic upon hearing this news and seemed to be extremely composed. But Xianxia's heart shook instead, and a wisp of coldness couldn't help but arise in his heart. He was originally feeling it was fortunate that even though the 3 dimensions were about to undergo an upheaval, only a mere few Xenorace experts would be able to enter the 3 dimensions and cause calamity. After all, the 3 dimensions formed a system of its own and possessed an exceedingly solid dimensional wall. Moreover, it was covered the energy of the laws of the Heaven Tao, and it would directly annihilate any heretics that were harmful to the 3 dimensions. But now it would seem like there had obviously been changes in the situation, and it had become severe. Those Xenorace experts had actually opened up a door to the 9th Hell, and they were able to surge endlessly into this place. In other words, so long as they occupied this 9th Hell, then the dimensional walls that guarded the 3 dimensions would have lost its deterrent force, and it would be as if it was non-existent, allowing the Xenorace to attack and retreat as they pleased. Most worrisome to Xianxia was the 3 dimensions would surely undergo an upheaval within 1,000 years. This was an exceedingly irrefutable fact, and it was only a matter of time. If those Xenorace experts were to occupy the 9th Hell and seize the opportunity of the chaos from the upheaval to swarm into the 3 dimensions, then it would undoubtedly be a successive calamity, and the consequences were unimaginable. No wonder they would send out so many teams to stop and kill the 9th Hell Tribe. If news of what happened here was leaked to the 3 dimensions, then all their expectations would come to naught. When he thought everything through clearly, an urgent feeling suddenly gushed out into Xianxia's heart, and he wished for nothing more than to immediately charge into the 3 dimensions and notify the world of this matter, so that the world be vigilant, converge its strength, and eliminate this cancer. But after that, Xianxia couldn't help but laugh bitterly. The 3 dimensions was enormous, so how many people could he alone rouse? Not to mention, even if he did speak of it, the others had to believe him, right? Forget it, I'll just try my best and work hard to do everything. As for what happens in the future, I can only let fate decide. Xianxia sighed deeply as he shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Xianxia, is there anything else you want to ask? The nearby Emoya held the bloody dagger in her hand while staring at the Xenorace expert, and she asked with a murderous look on her face. Wait a moment. Xianxia thought for a moment, and then his divine sense suddenly stretched out and entered into the Xenorace expert's body before carefully searching it. He was extremely curious about exactly what sort of cultivation technique the Xenorace cultivated. After all, he'd seen the cultivation techniques Shen Kuei and Shen Chen executed in the Door of Profundity, and it was entirely different when compared to any Dao art and divine ability that was circulated in the 3 dimensions, yet it just happened to possess shocking might and was exceedingly formidable. If he was able to find the source of their strength, then perhaps he would be able to deal with them more efficiently. His divine sense that was fine like flowing threads interweaved into an enormous net that instantly covered every single inch of space within the xenorace experts, and it was like the countless tentacles stretched out by an octopus, causing everything to appear down to the slightest detail within Xianxia's mind. Xianxia's eyes squinted and erupted with a strand of cold light. He noticed to his surprise that every single inch of veins, apertures, internal organs, bones, and so on and so forth within this wing world expert's body were covered in countless strange talisman markings that were fine like worms. It felt as if the wing world expert before him was a talisman, and the veins, apertures, internal organs, and bones were the numerous profound markings and lines that were drawn on the talisman. Moreover, these lines and markings were similarly formed from even more fine and profound talisman markings, causing it to form a marvelous effect that was akin to a formation. Besides that, a dazzling ball of light floated at the position of this xenorace expert's dantian, and it was like the golden core of a cultivator. But the difference was that this ball of light was actually formed from a complete symbol. This symbol was obscure and strange, and it was different from any talisman marking she had seen in the past. However, it emitted a shocking aura, an extremely exuberant and surging vitality. Without a shred of doubt, this ball of light formed from a symbol was surely where the cultivation of this wing world expert resided. Talisman markings? It's actually talisman markings. A flash of inspiration appeared in Xianxia's mind, and he seemed as if he'd been struck by lightning, causing him to fall into a state of deep contemplation and silence. Xianxia and Mengwei glanced at each other and felt something was strange about Xianxia, but they didn't make a sound and disturb him. They discerned that Xianxia was in a state akin to sudden comprehension, and once he was disturbed, it might cause irrecoverable losses to him. Haha! I understand now. Everything in this word, from the grass, trees, stars, sun, moon, the cycle of the tide, everything contains the striations of the Grand Tao, whereas as living beings of the world, don't humans possess such striations as well? These veins, skin, bones, internal organs, everything is a precious treasure bestowed by the heavens, the source of all profundities. If I observe them with the Tao of talismans, then aren't all of these the marks of talisman markings? If I infer based on this, then I only have to utilize the Tao of talismans to produce change, true essence as ink, my dantian as talisman paper, and my cultivation technique as the tip of my brush, and I'll surely be able to reconstruct and draw a black hole world in my body. After a long time, Xianxia finally returned to his sense, and his eyes were bright like stars. He emitted an indescribable bearing while his entire body seemed to glow. While he was observing the profundities within the expert from the wing world, he'd experienced a sudden flash of inspiration and comprehended a path to reconstruct his black hole world. So the knot in his heart that had been pent up within his all this time had finally been opened, causing his thoughts to become clear as he attained enlightenment, and he was overjoyed. Brother Xianxia, congratulations. Mengwei smiled as he cupped his fists. I obtained slight comprehension and resolved a knot in my heart. Now that I speak of it, I have to thank Big Brother Mengwei. If it wasn't for you capturing this wing world expert back, how could I have possible grasped this trace of opportunity? Xianxia cupped his hands as well. Haha, this is fate. It's yours if it's yours, and it can't escape, whereas if it isn't yours, then even if you strive for it desperately, it would be for naught in the end. Mengwei roared with laughter. Fate is too elusive like fortune and karmic luck, and it's hard to grasp. All I know is the pleasant surprise Big Brother Mengwei gave me is real, so this favor can only be attributed to you, said Xianxia with a smile. Mengwei was stunned, and then he roared with laughter. Right? Fate is like our future, and it's filled with the unknown. We cultivators should naturally compete with the Heaven Tao, and perhaps only in this way would we be able to seize a chance to live eternally with the ages. Xianxia deeply agreed as well. Cultivators sought immortality and the Tao. They competed with the heavens, the earth, men, and the Grand Tao. Only by competing would one be able to possess the slightest chance to attain the Grand Tao, and if one didn't compete, then one would transform into dirt in the ground sooner or later. All right. Is flattering each other enjoyable? Emoya couldn't help but roll her eyes as she was slightly unable to continue watching. Chen Shi and Meng Wei glanced at each other and smiled. Pooh! On the other side, Emoya's dagger descended, and she sliced off a bloody head. These two wing world experts were probably scouts. Now that they've died, it would surely draw the attention of the enemy. Chen, she said calmly, I suggest we take the initiative to attack and annihilate their camp. Annihilate? Meng Wei was stunned. Even if the enemy is only one of the 36 batches of xenorace experts, it's still a power of no less than 300 people. And there's even a violet crystal rank expert there. If any one of them were to escape, it would probably draw the attention of the other enemies. Chen, she smiled lightly as he said, Big brother Meng Wei, there's no need to worry. It's merely a violet crystal rank expert. Just you, Emoya, and me will be enough. He knew the differentiation of strength amongst xenorace experts clearly now. They similarly possessed a complete system that were respectively the black iron rank, bronze rank, silver rank, gold rank, violet crystal rank, general rank, and marquis rank. They roughly corresponded to the Violet Palace, Golden Hall, Golden Core, Rebirth, Nether Transformation, Earthly Immortal, and Heavenly Immortal realms. A Violet Crystal rank expert was only equivalent to a Nether Transformation realm cultivator. Besides that, the mysterious white-haired figure he'd seen in the Door of Profundity was a peerless expert that surpassed the Marquis rank, and he was called a Xenorace Saint Emperor. If he was placed in the 3 dimensions, he was a terrifying existence even more formidable than a heavenly immortal. Meng Wei was stunned, and he couldn't help but ask, With just the 3 of us? Chen, she said with a smile, Big brother Meng Wei, both you and Emoya are Nether Transformation realm experts. Could it be that a camp of merely 300 people can cause trouble for the 2 of you? Chen, she paused for a moment and continued, Not to mention we aren't going against them head-on. We just have to seize the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. And so long as we cooperate well, annihilating them would be as easy as flipping your hand. Sneak attack. Meng Wei's eyes lit up. This was a flat gravel area that neighbored the bank of the River of Hell, and at the center of the area was a campsite. Numerous teams of xenorace experts with slender figures and snow-white wings on their backs were patrolling the surroundings. A wave of bustling and clamorous noise frequently sounded out from the tent at the center of the campsite. Damn it! All of these native women of the 3 dimensions had rough skin, and it causes me to lose the desire to vent. Haha! Don't think too much. This place is the 9th hell, and I heard it was abandoned by the 3 dimensions innumerable years ago. How could the women here compare to the 3 dimensions? It's indeed so. I once heard from my ancestor that the women of the 3 dimensions flicker with the glow of spirit energy and were skilled in preserving their beauty. Their skin was extremely tender while their appearances were beyond charming. We'll be able to experience it once our army invades the 3 dimensions. Experience? Haha. It looks to me that you want to swallow their essence, right? Then what about these prisoners? Kill them? Kill them. After that, a wave of miserable shrill cries sounded out while accompanied by wild roars of laughter. It spread throughout the entire campsite, causing this place to seem as if it was infested with devils and ghosts, and it was ghastly and terrifying. When the guards around the campsite hear this wave of shrill cries, all of them laughed without end because this wasn't the first batch of 9th Hell Tribe women they'd killed, so they'd already become accustomed to this scene. Bastard! I'll kill all of these animals. Extremely far away from the campsite, Emoya's eyes were on the verge of spraying flames, and she gnashed her teeth to the point they almost shattered. Even though she was unable to see the scene that occurred in the distant, she knew just from hearing the clamorous noise and shrill cries that drifted over from the distance that some women from her clan had been tortured and killed. Emoya, if you want to annihilate them without leaving a single soul alive, then you better calm down. Meng Wei reminded in a low voice. His expression was similarly gloomy to the extreme, and he felt extreme grief and indignation as well. But he was similarly aware that this was a sneak attack. Once he lost control from rage, it might alarm the enemy and cause numerous unpredictable troubles. So he forcefully endured the seething killing intent in his heart and waited silently. Chen, she felt extremely uncomfortable as well. His divine sense was sufficient to envelop an area of a few tens of thousands of kilometers. He seen everything that had occurred in the campsite with extreme clarity, and the wild laughter of the xeno-race experts, their brutal and bloody methods, and the miserable and despaired voices emitted by those women before their deaths caused the flames of rage in his heart to burn. He finally understood why both the immortal sex and devil sex would reveal deep-rooted hatred when the word xeno-race was mentioned. The scene before his eyes was a perfect example. This sort of hatred was born between the xeno-race and 3 dimensions, and it was closely related with countless living beings. It had continued on for countless years from the primeval times until now, and it was irreconcilable and utterly impossible for compromise to be established. There was only a single method that was capable of eliminating this sort of hatred, and it was to annihilate the other party. Not long after, the xeno-race in the distant campsite started to withdraw their patrolling teams into the campsite to start cultivating and replenishing their strength. Due to the spirit energy in the 9th hell being dried up, even earthly immortal realm experts had to rely on spirit pills to replenish their strength, and it was the same for these xeno-race experts. Attack! A low and murderous voice lightly escaped Xianxia's mouth. In the next moment, the 3 of them had already transformed into shadows that flashed swiftly towards the campsite. It's truly a desolate place, and we even have to rely on cultivating to replenish our strengths every single day. This is truly detestable. A wing world expert sat in the campsite and was slightly bored. The 9th hell was too desolate and didn't have any place for them to amuse themselves. Women, wine, there was nothing. This caused him to be extremely bored and wish for nothing more than to leave this damnable place that was deathly still as soon as possible. Alas, I wonder when we'll be able to enter the 3 dimensions and play with the women there. He couldn't help but sigh and subconsciously licked his lips. Suddenly, a hand stretched out from behind him without the slightest sigh and covered his mouth. Before he could react, his mind droned as if it was struck by a sledgehammer, and his soul was instantly shattered. The 16th. A tall figure walked out from the shadows and instantly flashed towards the distance before vanishing. Pooh! At the other side, Meng Wei's hands that were thick like cattail leaf fans twisted fiercely and twisted off the head of an enemy, causing a light sound of bones shattering to resound out from the enemy's neck. Compared to Meng Wei's direct and resolute methods, Xianxia was obviously much more ruthless. She first shattered the soul of her enemy with her shaman energy before slashing repeatedly with her dagger. She even sliced the corpses of her enemies into strips before gathering them all with the intention of feeding them to bone hawks after they left the campsite. But the moves both of them utilized were the same. There weren't any dazzling glows, sounds that shook the heavens and the earth, or complicated techniques. Their movements were always simple, and it was simply to the point of being terrifying. Even she couldn't help but exclaim with surprise in his heart. He never expected that the technique of slaughter possessed by these 2 people would actually have attained such an extent, and it even allowed him to obtain great gains. Watching them slaughter wouldn't cause one to have a breathtaking feeling of beauty, and it would only cause one's heart to sink down ceaselessly and feel helpless and despair. She had experienced countless battles. There were some that were despicable and sinister, some that were dazzling and gorgeous, some that were mad and bloody. But he'd never seen such simple and terrifying slaughter like what he saw from Meng Wei and Xianxia. From the beginning until the end, both of them didn't reveal the slightest expression, and they seemed like emotionless puppets that were silently reaping the lives of their enemies. No one within the campsite noticed their clansmen were dying successively, and all the slaughter was being carried out in silence. There was a total of 300+ people within this campsite, and only the violet crystal rank expert amongst them was worthy of being paid attention to. The other gold rank, silver rank, and bronze rank experts were nothing worth mentioning. If it wasn't for the sake of silently annihilating all of them without allowing a single soul to survive, merely Meng Wei himself would be sufficient to sweep through most of the experts here. Even though Xianxia had completely lost his qi refinement cultivation while his body refinement cultivation had only recovered to around the golden core realm, his divine sense was formidable and was comparable to an earthly immortal realm expert. So long as he didn't go against xeno-race experts at the violet crystal rank and gold rank, killing the others was as easy as flipping his palm. Just like this, they were like three ghosts from hell that silently reaped the lives of all, and they took away the lives of their enemies while their enemies were caught off guard. Gradually, the slaughter started to draw close to the center of the campsite. The group of xenorace experts finally noticed something was off when their companions in the surroundings had vanished by more than half. "Watch out! There's an ambush!" A Wing World expert's voice hadn't finished resounding out when it stopped abruptly. All the clamorous noise in the campsite had vanished instantly, and it became deathly silent. Even the air seemed to have been frozen, and there wasn't even the slightest sound of the wind. Only the smell of blood assaulted the nose, and it had effused out since an unknown moment in time. Swish! The tent at the center of the campsite was suddenly lifted up before a tall young man in a silver robe walked out from within. His gaze was like bolts of lightning, and his imposing aura was peerlessly ferocious like a dragon. Obviously, he was the leader of this team, the Violet Crystal rank expert from the Wing World. Behind him were another 10 Wing World experts. All of them had deep auras, eyes that were suffused with bright lights, and all of them weren't inferior to Rebirth Realm cultivations. They were undoubtedly the 10 gold rank experts of the Wing World. "They're all dead." The tall young man swept the surroundings with his gaze, yet his expression was still composed. But the temperature in his eyes had instantly become icy cold to the extreme, and it emitted dense killing intent. "Who is it? Get the fuck out here." He stretched out his hand before slapping out an expanse of silver radiance that was like the Milky Way descending from the 9 heavens, and the entire campsite was blasted apart, causing dust and dirt to flutter about in the air. Bong! 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 Amidst this area that was suffused with dust and dirt, numerous sharp and rapid howls tore through the sky and resounded out abruptly, and they caused one's soul to shake and vital blood to roil. They were numerous piercingly cold light arrows that were coiled with dazzling shaman energy, and they were like numerous shooting stars that had descended from outer space and directly tore space apart to arrive with a speed that caused one to feel despair. Bang! 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 A string of explosions resounded out. 6 gold rank experts were caught off guard and were blasted apart by the terrifying light arrows, causing blood and flesh to spray throughout the sky. The remaining 4 gold rank experts dodged to the side. Yet before they could make any reaction, they felt their souls drone before they felt as if they were struck by lightning. Their vision went black while they saw stars, and their movements couldn't help but become slightly sluggish. It was precisely this slight sluggishness that seized their lives, and they were blasted apart into clouds of rain of blood and shattered flesh. "You're courting death," the tall young man roared furiously with a livid expression. At this moment, he'd already seen the appearance of the enemies that had invaded the camp clearly. There were actually only 3 people, and he recognized a man and a woman amongst them. The man and woman were the important targets for them to stop and kill because they were the 9th Hell Tribe's chieftain Mengwei and Emoya. The other young man had an extremely unfamiliar appearance to him, and he didn't remember such a person. But he could be sure that this young man was absolutely not a clansman of the 9th Hell Tribe. However, at this moment he couldn't be bothered to think about all this. His clansmen had actually been completely annihilated and only he remained. Besides causing him to be shocked and furious, he couldn't help but feel a wisp of deep coldness in his heart. According to the intelligence he obtained, both Mengwei and Emoya were only at the perfection stage of the rebirth realm, so not to mention being a match for him, even those 10 gold rank subordinates of his would be sufficient to annihilate Mengwei and Emoya. Yet now, they'd actually killed his 10 subordinates so easily, so how could he not be surprised? Damn it! Didn't the intelligence say that the 2 of them would be utterly incapable of breaking through to the rebirth realm in a short period of time? Why have both of them broken through and killed their way to stand before me? Could it be that it's because of that unfamiliar young man? The tall young man's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was surprised and bewildered in his heart. Swoosh! In the next moment, the wings behind his back flapped and flowed with boundless silver brilliance that covered the heavens and the earth, whereas he himself transformed into a wisp of silver light that retreated explosively. He knew extremely clearly that it was impossible to turn today's situation around, and he had to ask for support. A wisp of coldness arose on the corners of Meng Wei's mouth, and then he drew his bow. The entire bow surged with an ancient shaman energy that caused one's heart to palpitate, while the sounds of primeval fiend gods shouting could be faintly heard from within it. And it shook the heavens and the earth and seemed to be extremely tremendous and murderous. Bang! A 30 long light arrow that seemed like a ray of light penetrated through the sky. The tall young man that was a few thousands of kilometers in the distance practically had no ability to dodge at all before his entire body was blasted apart by this arrow and transformed into a rain of light, and he vanished completely without a trace. What a bow! After he annihilated that violet crystal rank expert, Meng Wei's fierce eyes gazed at the pitch-black and rugged bow in his hands, and he couldn't help but praise. This was a formidable shaman treasure. It was completely pitch-black and dark, and it emitted a mysterious and desolate aura. The body of the bow and its string were refined from the bone and tendon of a fiend god, causing it to be extremely rare and priceless. Meng Wei was a deserving expert of the Tao of archery, and he'd always had the reputation of godly archer in the 9th Hell tribe. Within his memory, he'd only heard that their tribe had once possessed such a divine weapon during the primordial era. Unfortunately, along with the passage of time, these rare and precious treasures had been obliterated from the world since a long time ago. This bow before his eyes was called Starowin, and it was lent to him by Xianxia, and he'd relied on the terrifying might of this bow to easily annihilate those 10 gold rank Xenorace experts and even blast that violet crystal rank expert apart with a single strike in the end. As the tip of his finger lightly rubbed the cold and hard body of the bow, Meng Wei looked at the Starowin bow for another short moment before resolutely passing it over to Xianxia. It's all thanks to Brother Chun, she providing me with such a divine weapon that we were able to annihilate the enemy so easily. Chun, she didn't receive it from him and said with a smile, since Big Brother Meng Wei liked it, then just keep it. In any case, it's a waste of God's given gifts in my hands, and it's only capable of bringing forth its true worth in the hands of an expert in the Tao of archery like Big Brother Meng Wei. He'd discerned a long time ago that Meng Wei was an absolute expert in the Tao of archery, and when Meng Wei's cultivation was combined with this Starowin bow, he would be able to erupt with a shocking combat strength. According to Xianxia's inference, even Yan Shisan might not be able to defeat Meng Wei in battle. This was still because Meng Wei hadn't grasped any grand Tao profundities, and if he entered the outside world and comprehended Tao insights, and only the heavens knew to exactly what extent his strength would improve to. Meng Wei was stunned. This man that was strong and robust like a stone, and had a composed and resolute character wouldn't experience the slightest change in feelings when he killed. Yet he was slightly at a loss for what to do when faced with Xianxia's gift. It couldn't be helped. He was too infatuated with the Tao of archery, and he was deeply in love with it. Since he started cultivating until now, he'd spent all his energy on it. So when he was faced with a precious treasure like the Starowin bow, he was simply like a child that had seen the toy it loved the most. How could he not be excited? Even the nearby Xianxia was stunned, as she never imagined she would just give away such a precious treasure on a whim, and based on Xianxia's expression, she didn't seem like he was joking. That caused her to be greatly shocked in her heart. This won't do. Such a treasure is too precious. I can't accept it. Meng Wei struggled in his heart for a very long time before gritting his teeth and refusing. Take it. Xianxia spoke with a tone that was beyond dispute, and he pushed the Starowin bow into Meng Wei's hands and said with a smile, "A treasure sword is given to a hero, just like powder is given to a beauty. Only Big Brother Meng Wei is worthy of this bow." As soon as he finished speaking, she turned and left. Now you owe this fellow too much. Xianxia couldn't help but sigh with emotion as she looked at Xianxia's back. Even our tribe owes him too much. I'll return it to him, even if I have to work for him for my entire life. Meng Wei put the Starowin bow away carefully, and he'd already recovered its calm and steady expression. Only his pair of fierce eyes were bright and dazzling, and they revealed a strand of extreme resolution. If it was me, I would probably be unable to refuse such kindness as well, said Xianxia with a smile. She knew extremely clearly as well that she had gradually integrated himself into the 9th Hell tribe, and perhaps only by following his footsteps would the clansmen of the 9th Hell tribe be able to gain a foothold in the outside world before growing and strengthening themselves. After they annihilated the team formed from Wing World experts, Xianxia's group of 3 returned hastily to the campsite, and then they didn't stop at all before moving once more. The appearance of xenorace experts caused Xianxia to feel a strand of pressure that struck right at him. Perhaps they were able to annihilate one of the groups with a sneak attack, but they might not have such luck the next time. So leaving this place swiftly was the pressing matter at the moment. For the sake of hurrying on their journey, Xianxia had even shortened the time for resting and organizing themselves every day to 4 hours. In other words, during this extremely short period of time, besides having to eat, the members of the tribe had to recover sufficient strength, whereas those youths and young children had to give consideration to cultivating as well. Fortunately, this sort of pressed rhythm didn't crush those youths and young children. On the contrary, all of this allowed them to understand how valuable time was, and they cultivated even more painstakingly than before. On the other hand, Xianxia didn't remain idle, and he relied on the divine wine within the jade pot to recover his body refinement cultivation while deducing and pondering about how to construct the black hole world that satisfied him the most with talisman markings. He knew very clearly that this wasn't something that could be completed overnight. After all, once one's Tao foundation was crippled, repairing it was more difficult than ascending the heavens. Fortunately, he'd already found the path and wasn't anxious. Food had to be eaten one mouthful at a time, just like one's path had to be tread one step at a time. He only had to prepare everything sufficiently, and it would be enough. At the same time, he had to take on the tasks of cooking food, guiding the youths and young children in cultivation and comprehending Tao insight and so on and so forth. He was extremely busy, and he wished for nothing more than to split every minute into 2 so that he would have double the time he had now. Even while they were on the way forward, his voice could be heard guiding those young children and youths. On the 9th day of their march, they encountered the campsite of a batch of xenorace experts that they couldn't avoid. After a bloody battle, the enemies were completely annihilated. Yet another 3 guards of the tribe had perished for the sake of protecting the safety of the youths and young children, so only a mere 7 guards remained when Moya and Meng Wei were included. This horrifying battle caused the atmosphere in the group to become even more silent, while the hearts of every single person had a ball of flames burning within it, and it caused them to cultivate even more painstakingly. Because Xianxia provided an unending flow of spirit medicine and food every single day, the advancement of these youths and young children was extremely swift, and practically all of them had already advanced to the Golden Hall realm. Amongst them, Blackie, Scarface, Rock, and the others had even advanced to the Golden Core realm in one go, and they obtained generous praise from the others. Xianxia kept his promise and gave them another reward: the divine abilities Deity Transformation and Heavenly Transformation. On the other hand, Rock, Xiaoyan, and the others that cultivated in Qi refinement obtained a perfect Tao-grade martial technique passed down by Xianxia, and he gave them each an Earth-rank magic treasure. Such rewards caused the eyes of the other youths in the tribe to go red with envy, and they cultivated even more painstakingly and practically desperately, causing Meng Wei and Moya to feel extremely joyful. This could be considered to be the one and only thing that caused them to be happy during this arduous march. 14th day of the march. They encountered an attack once more. Unlike the last time, this attack was formed from 3 xenorace teams, and they totaled almost 1,000 people. Moreover, there were 3 violet crystal rank experts amongst them. This battle seemed to be exceptionally horrifying and tragic because of this. During this battle, the youths of the Violet Lightning Camp and Azure Frost Camp had joined in as well. It was originally an order Xianxia gave because he had no other choice, but he never imagined that these youths actually erupted with shocking combat strength. Every 20 people formed a team while 3 teams formed a camp, and they cooperated tacitly with each other and actually caused the silver rank and bronze rank experts in the enemy forces to be heavily injured. But reality was brutal. Up until the point the battle ended, 6 youths and 3 young children amongst them had left them forever. The most grievous, even to the 9th Hell tribe, was the old man that was thin like firewood. The Lord Priest they respected like a god had exhausted the last bit of his strength to bring a violet crystal rank xenorace expert down along with him during the battle for the sake of protecting those youths, and he'd passed away along with this. Before he died, the old priest didn't leave behind any last words, and he just grasped Xianxia's hand falteringly. Xianxia understood the meaning of the old priest, and he kowtowed solemnly when facing the old man's corpse. Without this old man, then he, Xianxia wouldn't exist today. So, he would help the old man take proper care of these clansmen of the old man's. After this battle, only 72 youths and 10 young children remained within the tribe, whereas the guards and old priest had perished. This was an extremely heavy tribulation. After they experienced the baptism of fire and blood, the youths seemed to have matured overnight, and they became steady and sensible. 26th day of the march. Xianxia's body refinement cultivation had recovered, and he was only a step away from the nether transformation realm. 31st day of the march. A xenorace team was annihilated, and they obtained information that carried a mix of hope and worry. There was a passageway that led towards the outside world 45,000 kilometers ahead. But the thing that caused their hearts to feel heavy was that there were 6 xenorace teams standing guard before the passageway, and not only were there 6 violet crystal rank xenorace experts there was supposedly a general rank xenorace expert holding down the fort. A general rank xenorace expert was comparable to an earthly immortal realm expert. Xianxia, who'd once suffered the assault of an earthly immortal realm expert, deeply understood how terrifying such an existence was, and he decided right away that they wouldn't continue moving forward and would set up camp in a gorge. For the sake of avoiding the detection of their enemies, Xianxia even used almost 7 days of time to set up a grand formation in the surroundings of the gorge, the Azure Sun Netherflame Formation. This formation was formed from 108 types of minor Azure Sun slaughter formations, and the core of the formation was the quasi-immortal artifact, Flaming Peacock Fan. Even a violet crystal rank xenorace expert would perish upon entering it. But this grand formation consumed 99% of all the materials in Xianxia's possession, and besides some spirit medicines, magic treasures, and miscellaneous items like jade slips, he could be said to be squeaky clean. Since a grand formation was set up, it naturally required energy to be activated. Even though the 9th Hell's spirit energy had dried up, it wasn't a problem for Xianxia, and after making great efforts for some time, he was finally able to successfully move the immortal energy emitted by the dark parasol sapling within his dantian. With the immortal energy as the source of the grand formation's energy, it was naturally much more formidable than when being powered by spirit energy. The price Xianxia paid for this was that he could only stay within the core of the grand formation while drawing out the immortal energy at all times, and he was unable to move another step. But he was extremely satisfied with this. With the cover of this grand formation, it was extremely difficult to notice them from the outside unless an expert at the level of the earthly immortal realm personally searched this area. But the probability of that was extremely tiny. After all, this was an inconspicuous gorge in the 9th Hell, and no one would turn their gaze over here. Even if they did look over here, there would absolutely be no one that would expect that a grand formation would be here. The reason Xianxia had done all of this was to provide everyone in the 9th Hell tribe a safe place during this extremely tense situation and fiercely improve their own strength. On the other hand, he himself wanted to start reconstructing his black hole world as well. Xianxia stood in midair above the gorge while looking down at it, and he finally heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Suddenly, he stretched open his arms, causing a strand of surging immortal energy to gush out. Swish! The entire surroundings of the gorge suddenly surged with 108 azure-colored flames, and they were like countless azure suns that had risen from the ground and emitted an azure radiance. They interweaved together to form expanses of complicated and dense formations that flowed with brilliant light, and they were extraordinarily beautiful. After that, countless formations converged together and roiled endlessly as they emanated a myriad of rays of azure brilliance. And at the center of them all was surging specks of illusory and faint nether flames. The nether flames seemed like a mist yet weren't a mist, seemed like clouds yet weren't clouds. They revealed a piercingly cold and deep black color and seemed like numerous black-colored stars that ornamented the surging azure-colored flaming radiance. Xianxia's gaze was like a bolt of lightning as he flicked his sleeve and lightly spat out a single word. Form! OM! A wave of strange fluctuation arose as the myriad of azure flaming radiances and the specks of black-colored nether flames that were like stars transformed into flowing rays of light that entered into every single corner of the gorge. Numerous misty and enormous green barriers enveloped the gorge like overturned bowls, and their surfaces surged with countless talisman markings. A light flashed as if the formation took a breath, and then it vanished instantly. When looked at solely from its outward appearance, this gorge was still as before, exceedingly ordinary and inconspicuous in this desolate and deathly still ninth hell. Only Xianxia knew how terrifying this Azure Sun netherflame formation was, and once it was sufficient to annihilate a nether transformation realm expert upon activation. The defensive strength of the Grand Formation was extremely formidable as it converged the ability of illusion, slaughter, and defense in one. If it wasn't for him not possessing sufficient materials, the might of the formation would be even more formidable, and even earthly immortal realm experts would find it impossible to break through. Xianxia quickly abandoned all unpractical thoughts because the spirit materials in his possession had already been completely cleaned out by this grand formation, and it was only wishful thinking if he continued thinking about anything else. All the youths were cultivating extremely painstakingly within the gorge. After they experienced the baptism of countless battles and unexpected events, their immature and young faces carried a strand of steadiness and maturity between their brows. Moya and Meng Wei stood at the side while supervising their cultivation. Actually, there was utterly no need for them to supervise because the death of the old priest and the ceaseless loss of their companions had caused these youths to be filled with guilt and hatred, and they'd vented all their feelings onto cultivating. They knew that if it wasn't for protecting their safety in the previous battles, it would be impossible for the old priest and those guards to have perished. This allowed them to deeply understand a principle, and it was that a weak strength would only be a burden to seniors and companions by one side. So regardless of if it was for themselves or their companions, they had to become stronger. Only by becoming stronger would they be able to continue living and allow their companions and seniors to cease their worry. Xianxia noticed this scene upon returning to the gorge, and he didn't say anything before turning around to return to his tent. He didn't waste any time and sat down cross-legged before starting to deduce in his mind. He wanted to start constructing his black hole world, and he had to make the best use of every minute of time. Based on the information he'd obtained earlier, he was clearly aware that there was a passageway that led to the outside world 45,000 kilometers away from here. This passageway appeared by itself after the Xenorace experts broke open the dimensional walls of the ninth hell, and it had been discovered by the Xenorace first, causing them to station 6 teams to guard it. Amongst them was supposedly a general rank expert holding down the fort, and this expert's strength was entirely comparable with an earthly immortal realm expert. If he wanted to lead the clansmen of the ninth hell tribe out to the outside world, then they had to charge through the defenses of the enemy and even had to escape right under the nose of a general rank expert, and there was no other way besides this. Xianxia knew extremely clearly that it was absolutely like throwing an egg against a rock if he attacked forcefully with their current strength, and they would die without a doubt. So, he chose this gorge and intended to make sufficient preparations before making a move. Moreover, he had other considerations when choosing this gorge. All along the way, they'd annihilated a total of 6 Xenorace teams, and there were still another 30 Xenorace teams tasked with stopping and killing them. This was an extremely shocking number. After all, every single team had a Violet Crystal rank expert and 10 Gold rank experts amongst them. Once all of them were converged together, then it would absolutely be a terrifying nightmare to them. Most importantly, as far as Xianxia was concerned, this nightmare would surely come true, because they'd exposed too much of their tracks and information during these few days of advancement, and so long as the enemy wasn't stupid, the enemy would surely have guessed a long time ago that they were not far away from the passageway that led to the outside world. Under these circumstances, it was extremely likely that the remaining 30 teams of Xenorace experts would converge together and stand on guard before the passageway with the intention of waiting for the rabbit to jump into the trump. On the other hand, the other objective Xianxia had when choosing this gorge was to make this gorge their base camp while they recuperated and built up energy, and then carry out round after round of plans and actions against their enemies. Only in this way would they be able to weaken the threat posed by their enemies to the greatest extent. After the time for an incense stick to burn, Xianxia awoke from his deep contemplation and deducing, and he took a deep breath and didn't hesitate in the slightest to make his divine sense seem like strands of tiny and swift tentacles that enveloped every single inch of his body. Hiss! A strand of true essence surged out from within his body, and it was drawn over by Xianxia and condensed into the shape of the tip of a brush before he started drawing and inscribing on a part of his meridians. His meridians had been nourished by the immortal energy emitted by the dark parasol sapling to the point of being extremely tough and tensile, and it was comparable to a magic treasure. So it was obviously countless times more difficult to inscribe talisman markings on it. This wasn't like drawing talisman markings on talisman paper, and it was even more alike to carving on hard rock with an iron awl. Every single stroke and line required him spending an enormous amount of strength. Moreover, his meridians were too fine, so it was much more difficult to inscribe numerous dense and profound talisman markings on it. Once the slightest mistake was to appear, then not only would all his previous work be in vain, it would even harm his meridians, and the consequences were unimaginable. But Xianxia had already mentally prepared himself for all this, so he didn't feel nervous. Presently, his entire mind was converged onto his meridians, causing his mind to be empty as if he'd returned to those years of his youth where he crafted and sold talismans, and he carried a concentrated expression while being completely oblivious to himself. Hiss! 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 His tough and tensile meridians trembled while numerous profound marks that were filled with true essence wriggled like worms on its surface, and then formed into numerous patterns that were complicated like the Milky Way. These patterns contained metal, wood, fire, water, earth, and it contained all the various grand Tao profundities that Xianxia had comprehended and grasped. Xianxia's true essence brush tip paused momentarily before placing a heavy final stroke, and it was like signature of an artist after completing a work of art. These patterns that were fine like petals converged with each other and shrunk before finally constructing an extremely ancient and profound pattern. This pattern converged the quintessence energies of various grand Taos, and they circulated with each other to form a vortex that seemed like an enormous black hole that could be found in the depths of the universe. At the instant it condensed into form, it actually emitted a strand of shocking energy of devour. Xianxia's face eased up as he revealed a satisfied expression. But in next to no time, he concentrated once more and abandoned all distracting thoughts before starting to inscribe once more on this meridian. This was merely the first talisman marking, and what he intended to do was cover all the meridians, aperture, bones, and even internal organs within his body with these talisman markings. Then, he would use this as the foundation to converge the energy within his body and reopen a world within his dantian and reconstruct a new black hole world. He inscribed one by one and rested when he was tired, and then started inscribing once more after he recovered. Along with the ceaseless inscribing, his technique became even more skilled while his understanding of the Tao of talismans gradually deepened, causing the speed he inscribed at to grow faster and faster. Just like this, day after day passed, and before long, a month had passed. During this period of time, he'd finally finished inscribing the numerous dense and profound talisman markings on his meridians, apertures, and internal organs. They were like a multitude of gorgeous flowers that bloomed on every inch of his body, and they were suffused with a mysterious and deep sheen that was illusory and misty. Xianxia was faintly able to sense the unique sense of cooperation between these talisman markings. The metal, wood, fire, water, earth, wind, lightning, star. All these profundities were condensed with the structure of the Devour Tao insight, causing various profound comprehensions to flow through his heart like a stream. He was suddenly enlightened. In practically an instant, countless extremely profound and complicated traces of the Grand Tao gushed into his mind. These Grand Tao traces numbered in the millions, and they responded to each other, coiled together, joined together, and finally condensed into 5 mysterious and extremely vast patterns. Every single pattern was dense and complicated to the limit like an ocean of talisman markings, and the talisman markings within it couldn't be counted. Moreover, these 5 mysterious patterns were surprisingly the Azurewood Divine Talisman, the White Metal Divine Talisman, the Crimson Fire Divine Talisman, the Blackwater Divine Talisman, and the Yellow Earth Divine Talisman. I finally understand the 5 elements circulate and form the myriad of things in the world. They're the quintessence that constructs the world, whereas if I want to reconstruct my black hole world, why can't I use the 5 great divine talismans as the foundation? In merely an instant, Xianxia felt as if he'd been suddenly enlightened while his thoughts became clear, and an unprecedentedly bold thought appeared in his mind. As soon as this thought appeared, it caused him to have a strong impulse in his heart. and he wished for nothing more than to begin now. He really didn't hesitate this time, nor did he ponder about it repeatedly, and he followed along with this impulse. Because since the moment he started inscribing talisman markings on his meridians, this was already destined to be an unprecedentedly risky action, and there was rarely anyone since the ancient times that had done this, causing him to have no experience to follow nor have any senior to guide him. He could only rely on himself to find the correct method and complete it. Since it was like that, then why restrain himself? Acting boldly with confidence was sufficient. Bang! In the next moment, the immortal energy that sprayed out from the dark parasol sapling within his empty dantian transformed into an expanse of surging true essence streams that started to swiftly interweave and condense together according to Xianxia's guidance. 3 months later, within the gorge, the final youth of the Violet Lightning Camp at the Golden Hall realm in body refinement had finally stepped into the Golden Core realm. This was absolutely a miracle. It didn't occur on a single person but an entire group of people. After all, they were only youths and were mostly only 14 or 15 years old. Even if it was in the dark reverie, stepping into the Golden Core realm at such an age was sufficient to cause a great stir in the world. Besides their own extraordinary natural endowment and natural talent, the reason they were able to accomplish all of this was because they cultivated painstakingly. There was no lack of geniuses in the world, yet there were very few geniuses capable of cultivating desperately for a few months as if their lives were on the line like how they'd done. During this period of time, they practically utilized every single minute to cultivate. No one slacked or was indolent, and they were like a group of madmen that didn't know what exhaustion was as they cultivated painstakingly to the point it seemed they'd put their lives on the line. In comparison to the delightful results of the Violet Lightning Camp, the hard work of the Azure Frost Camp was similarly striking. They took the path of chi refinement and had started much later. But due to the various spirit medicines provided by Xianxia and the immortal energy that suffused the surroundings of the gorge, their cultivations rose steadily and at a tremendous pace. Up until now, even the youngest snotty kid already possessed a cultivation at the Golden Hall realm, whereas the slightly older Rock had even become the second existence in the Azure Frost Camp to attain the Golden Core realm in chi refinement. This first to advance to the Golden Core realm was naturally Xiaoyan. This little lady's natural talent was extraordinarily good, and even if she was placed within extraordinary powers like the 10 great immortal sects where geniuses gathered, her natural talent could still be considered to be monstrous. Even though she was only 10 now, she was the number 1 figure in the Azure Frost Camp in terms of cultivation. If Xianxia were to see this, he would probably be greatly shocked as well. After all, he was only an existence that had just stepped into the congenital realm when he was 10, and he wasn't even at the Violet Palace realm. But Meng Wei, who'd always been supervising their cultivation, only said it wasn't bad. And he didn't praise or commend them but spoke so normally. It was even to the extent that he was slightly displeased. Even though the situation was pressing now, Xianxia had given these youths conditions that were truly too good. An endless supply of various spirit medicines, formidable and profound cultivation techniques, the immortal energy that suffused the air. With such shocking and abundant resources piled up together, the youths had actually only attained the Golden Core realm now, and not a single one had broken through to the Rebirth realm. This caused Meng Wei to be rather disappointed, because according to his estimations, at least 3 or 4 Rebirth realm cultivators had to appear amongst these youths, or one at the very least, right? If the cultivators of the Dark Reverie knew of Meng Wei's thoughts, then they would surely be angered to the point of spitting blood, because these requirements were simply absurd. After all, even if it was in the extraordinary powers of the Dark Reverie, even if one utilized countless resources to build up such a cultivation, it was already sufficient to make the seniors of the sect beam with smiles, and they wouldn't have a trace of displeasure. These requirements of his were really too harsh. Has he still not emerged from closed-door cultivation? Meng Wei frowned and asked with lightly. No, Mo-ya shook her head. The time has arrived. We'll carry it out according to the original plan. Meng Wei decided right away. Wouldn't it be too? Mo-ya hesitated. They'll forever be unable to mature if they don't experience tempering. They must surmount this test. Meng Wei went silent for a long time before speaking word by word. Meng Wei led the Violet Lightning Camp as he moved forward carefully. The passageway that led to the outside world was 45,000 kilometers ahead, and it seemed to be extremely far, but a nether transformation realm cultivator only needed 10 minutes to traverse such a distance. If one's movement technique was swift, then one could arrive in the time of a few breaths. Meng Wei didn't dare to be careless because leaving the gorge meant they'd lost the protection of the Azure Sun Netherflame formation, and it similarly meant that they would encounter enemies at any moment. According to his inferences, the enemy would have surely noticed something a long time ago after they annihilated 6 Xenorace teams, and perhaps the enemy had already converged in this area and were waiting for them to walk into a trap. Every single one of the youths from the Violet Lightning camp stood in the placement of the 5 elements and formed a combat unit. Every 4 combat units formed a team that stood according to the placement of the 4 symbols. Moreover, amongst the 3 teams that stood in the placement of the 4 symbols, one was at the front while the other 2 stood before the flank, and they formed a shaped formation. When looked at from the sky, the entire Violet Lightning camp seemed to be formed into a large trifactor formation by 12 5-element formations and 3 4-symbol formations. Each formation overlapped another and were linked together, causing them to act in cooperation in an orderly manner and emit a murderous air. Besides that, every single team had a team leader in the lead, and it was Blackie, Scarface, and Baldy. There was a certain distance maintained between the 3 of them, yet they faintly formed a small-scale trifactor formation. This was the battle arrangement that Xianxia had passed down to them. The numerous youths formed the points in the grand formation, then the points joined into lines and lines took form. In the end, they converged into a large-scale grand formation. Moreover, these 3 team leaders were the core of the grand formation, and the issuing of all orders had to be cooperatively completed by them. This wasn't a mode of individual battle any longer, they were battling as a whole, and they pursued terrifying strength attained from gathering the strength of the group. Not a single person could make a move arbitrarily and had to listen to orders, otherwise the might of the grand formation would be reduced greatly. This battle arrangement was very casually named by Xianxia as the Trifactor Spike Charge Formation. Besides cultivating in the gorge, the youths had always been carrying out drills with this formation. Now they were already capable of executing it flawlessly, and the cooperation between them was extremely tacit, orderly, and systematic. But even Xianxia was unable to give a clear answer about how the might of such a battle arrangement actually was. After all, this was the first time the youths had stepped onto the battlefield in the form of the Trifactor Spike Charge Formation, and it hadn't experienced the baptism of true battle. Actually, according to Xianxia's thoughts, the Violet Lightning camp couldn't even be considered as the most basic unit in a large-scale battle, and the most important aspect when commanding such a small-scale team was formations and tacit understanding. If there were sufficient members, then this trifactor spike charge formation could even be expanded without limit: 100,000 people, 1,000,000 people, 10 million people. So long as they cooperated well and were commanded well, then its might would multiply. An orderly and uniform team like this that was like an army was absolutely capable of sweeping through all disorderly cultivators. It couldn't be said to sweep through without resistance, but no one would be able to bear its blunt. Taking the 5-element formations, for example. The vital energy of the 5 people that formed the formation were linked together and acted in cooperation with each other from a distance. It was capable of forming a perfect circulation that greatly increased the communication and tacit understanding between each other, and it was a rather practical formation. On the other hand, even higher-level formations would even condense its own unique killer moves, and these killer moves were capable of casting the world in a shade and carried an extraordinarily formidable might. But it wasn't so easy to practice such a battle arrangement. Firstly, the members that formed the grand formation must obey orders and obey them without condition. Secondly, they must firmly remember the formation's variations, placement, arrangement, and so on and so forth. This was still the simplest trifactor spike charge formation, whereas some complicated grand formations had even more harsh requirements, and merely the variations they had were sufficient to trouble most people. Moreover, even though this sort of battle arrangement was capable of increasing one's combat strength, it wasn't all-powerful. The situation of battles changes in an instant, and it tests the commander's ability of insight and acting according to circumstances. Meng Wei carefully opened up the way ahead while sizing up the Violet Lightning camp, and he noticed all the youths had calm and composed expressions while moving in a uniform and orderly manner. Besides that, none of them were nervous or excited, and he couldn't help but be rather satisfied in his heart. When facing battle, all one needed was a calm heart and the ability to act resolutely. Every other feeling would more or less affect one's performance in battle. Especially when it was this sort of group battle, calmness and obedience was the key. Watch out! There's something up ahead! Meng Wei's eyes suddenly flashed with a wisp of cold light, and he reminded via voice transmission with a low voice. The expressions of the youths remained unchanged. They were still calm and composed, but their eyes flashed with a wisp of a murderous and excited expression. The true first battle of their violet lightning camp had arrived. Swoosh! 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 In the distant sky, sharp sounds of the air being torn apart rumbled like a rising and falling tide. And then a team that was like an expanse of black clouds appeared within their fields of vision. This black cloud possessed a surging, imposing aura, and threw the winds and the clouds in the surroundings into disorder. This was a xenorace team that was made up of around 300 over people. Just like the teams Meng Wei and the others had encountered before, this team similarly possessed a violet crystal rank expert and 10 gold rank experts. If it was before, Meng Wei would absolutely be extremely worried when he encountered such a force. But now, when he saw their scattered formation as they swarmed over together, a wisp of a relaxed and stable feeling couldn't help but gush out from his heart. Both parties didn't waste their breaths and directly entered into battle. At this moment, there was utterly no need to say anything because these xenorace experts had destroyed their homes and slaughtered over 1 million of their clansmen. A huge debt of blood had already been formed between them long ago. On the other side, those xenorace experts were even excited when they saw Meng Wei and the others. Their assignment this time was to stop and slaughter the survivors of the 9th Hell Tribe, and now that they'd unexpectedly encountered members of the 9th Hell Tribe, how could they show the slightest mercy? Rumble! Some xenorace experts were intolerably anxious since a long time ago, and they let out wild and savage laughter as they charged over like a swarm of bees. They executed extremely violent attacks as soon as they made a move, and it was a complete mess without the slightest order. Now, even the 3 team leaders of the Violet Lightning Camp, Blackie, Scarface, and Baldy heaved sighs of relief, and then their gaze became icy cold and murderous. At the same time, exceedingly powerful shaman energy rumbled and surged out of every single youth in the entire Violet Lightning Camp. All of them transformed into 30 tall giants, and they seemed like numerous mountains that had risen from the ground with exceedingly shocking impetus. Their auras acted in cooperation with each other from a distance before finally converging into surging killing intent that seemed material, and it was like a furious dragon that was charging into the sky as it enveloped the entire battlefield.